Hello Year 6 and welcome to the first of 6 lessons on how to calculate a percentage of an amount. In this video we are going to look at what a percentage is. The definition of a percentage is the same as that of a decimal and that of a fraction. A percentage shows part of a whole expressed as a number between 0 and 100. Percent directly translates to per 100. Which tells us when using percentages, a whole is split into 100 equal parts. Take a look at this square. You can see that it has been split into 100 equal parts. Each of those parts represents 1%. If we had all of those parts, each of those little squares that represents 1%, we would have 100%. So now have a look at this square. You can see that it has still been split into 100 equal parts. 50 of those 100 equal parts are green, and the other 50 of those 100 equal parts are white. This tells us that 50%, 50 out of 100, is green and 50% is white. Now have a look at this shape. It's exactly the same size and shape as the last shape that you saw. We still have 50% of it green and 50% of it white. However, we would need to use our knowledge of fractions to explain why. Looking at this shape, we can see there are 2 equal parts. 1 out of 2 of those parts are green, and the other 1 out of those 2 equal parts is white. This tells us that half is green and half is white. As a percentage, half is 50%. So you can see how the shape that you saw last time when it was split into 100 equal parts and this shape that's split into 2 equal parts shows the same amount as green and the same amount as white. They both show 50% green and 50% white. We can use fractions to explain why 1/2 is equal to 50%. If I write 1/2 on my flip chart, 1 is my numerator, 2 is my denominator, I can convert this fraction to an equivalent fraction so that it shows that it's out of 100 instead of out of 2. So if I, in my line, I'll write 100. 2, to get to 100 through multiplication or division, is multiplied by 50. 1, whatever we do to the top, we do to the bottom. Whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top. 1 multiplied by 50 is 50. We can use this to explain why 1/2 is the same as 50%. 50% means 50 per 100 or out of 100, which is what this fraction here shows. And you can see how half is equivalent to 50 over 100. Now take a look at this shape. What percentage does it show? Or should I say, what percentages does it show? Well, 25 out of 100 of those squares are green. 75 out of the 100 equal squares are white. This shows us that 25% of the squares are green and 75% of the squares are white. However, we are not used to seeing 25% or a quarter of a shape represented in the way you've just seen it. So now have a look at this shape. You can see here very clearly that 1/4 of that shape has been shaded. It is still 25 out of those 100 squares, it's just been laid out in a slightly different format. Looking at how much of this shape is white, we can do exactly the same thing as we did before. 75 out of those 100 squares, those 100 equal squares, are white. This tells us that 75% of this shape is white. Looking at that shape, however, we can see 1/4 of it is green, which therefore means 3/4 of the rest of the shape is white. So like we did with the 50% and the half, let's use our knowledge of fractions to see if we can explain why 1/4 is equivalent to 25% and 3/4 is equivalent to 75%. here's our fraction, 1/4. And we want our denominator to be 100 because we know a percentage is out of 100. How do we go from 4 to 100? We multiply by 25. How do you go from 1 to nothing? 1 multiplied by 25. Because whatever we do to the top, we do to the bottom. Whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top. 1 multiplied by 25 is 25. So you can see how 1/4 and 25 out of 100 are equivalent fractions. And 25 out of 100 tells us that 1/4 is equivalent to 25%. Let's do the same for 3/4. 3/4, 100. 4 to get to 100 is exactly the same as this example because it's a 4 as a denominator. 4 to get to 100 we multiply by 25. Whatever we do to the bottom we do to the top. 3 multiplied by 25 is 75, which tells us 3/4 is equivalent to 75 over 100, which is 75 per 100 or 75%. Have a look at this shape here. This shape is split into 4 equal parts. One of those 4 equal parts is white, and 3 of those 4 equal parts are green. This tells us 1/4 is white, and 3/4 is green. So in terms of what that is as a percentage, like before, 1/4 is equivalent to 25%, so 25% is white, and 3/4 is equivalent to 75%, so 75% is green. So to summarise what we've learned in this video, we've learned that a percentage, like a decimal and a fraction, shows part of a whole. We've learned that percent means per 100. We've learned that 50% is equivalent to a half. We've learned that 25% is equivalent to a quarter. And we've learned that 75% is equivalent to 3/4. We need to remember as many of those facts as possible to help us as we progress through this week's of lessons so that we become really confident when working with percentages. I hope you enjoy. In the next percentage video, you will be looking at how to calculate 50% of a number. Thank you very much. See you soon.